I'd like to give now. It's provided by our speaker, Catherine Vance. It's excerpted from the introduction to the essay collection, Mistakes and Miracles, Congregations on the Road to Multiculturalism. In her 2018 report, UUA President Reverend Susan Frederick Gray wrote, "What a time this is, a time when we are all being called into a deeper practice of our theology, living into the call at the heart of Unitarian Universalism for beloved community, a community that practices a radically inclusive and compassionate, anti-racist, multicultural faith within and acts powerfully in partnership and just solidarity for justice and liberation beyond." She goes on to say, "The work to create such beloved community takes deepest root within our congregations, where we live into the fullness of the calling. When a diverse group of people hang in there together, mindfully and humbly trying to embody their faith in all they say and do, while learning how to be in right relationship with each other, miracles of transformation take place, both in the congregation's individual members and in the institution itself. Congregations are living, breathing human organisms. They are messy, constantly in flux, and prone to make mistakes. Yet they also can be sources of inspiration, comfort, action, and joy. They can be where some of the most important and enduring change happens. We are a covenantal faith where we call each other into the work. On the one hand, when congregations fail to live up to this covenant, they can harm the people who have trusted them. Too often those harmed come from traditionally marginalized groups who feel barred from the center of our congregational life. On the other hand, when we UUs live up to our covenant, then we revitalize the whole project of congregational life. Our congregational stories can serve as inspiration points, as launching pads for both brick and mortar congregations and newer 21st century forms of community building. I'd like to introduce our speaker now. You just never know who's going to run up. Catherine Vance is a member of Bay Area UU Church and is enrolled as a Master of Divinity student at the ILIF School of Theology in Denver. She has completed a chaplaincy fellowship at MD Anderson in Houston. She's also a teacher and a writer. Her novel, The Mountains Under Her Feet, came out in March. We are very pleased to be able to welcome Catherine Vance back to speak to us today.
Well, there's a second reading. It's a short one. It's a poem by the Sufi poet Jalaluddin Rumi, and I'm going to read it twice. Out of myself, but wanting to go beyond that, wanting what I see in your eyes, not power, but to kiss the ground with the dawn breeze for company, wearing white pilgrim cloth. I have a certain knowing, but now I want sight. So here it is again. Out of myself, but wanting to go beyond that, wanting what I see in your eyes, not power, but to kiss the ground with the dawn breeze for company, wearing white pilgrim cloth. I have a certain knowing, but now I want sight. So I want to just thank you all again for inviting me. You may know that my home church, Bay Area UU, is getting a new minister who's from Galveston. So we're very excited about that she already has this familiarity with not only Unitarian Universalism in our region, but it just has a buy-in to the Gulf Coast area. So a couple of months ago, we had the chance to hear her speak about the power of uncertainty and of acknowledging how difficult it can be to live not knowing what the future holds. So I wonder if you have heard the term liminal space, which refers to places and life situations that are like thresholds. They're suspended between worlds. So you can think of maybe an echoing stairwell with the doors above and below, or maybe a street at 2 o'clock in the morning. Or think of someone like Jay, who's packing up all their possessions and driving to a new place in a new town. Someone who's decided also to maybe take their first steps in a gender transition. So, okay. So you've done that. Very good. So liminal spaces are full of discomfort sometimes, but they're also full of excitement and possibility. And so liminal spaces are extremely spiritual. They offer an opportunity for vision and intention despite the fear and despite the uncertainty. Well, in the sermon that I heard our new minister preach, she offered reassurance that when we're in liminal space, it's good to know that we're not alone, that we have company in what we're facing. So there's a lot of power in community and in facing things in concert, because if we can feel our strength and we can stay united in love and care for each other, we really can accomplish just about anything that we set our minds to. So each congregation now gets to ask itself, what is it that we want to be? Not only who are we, but what do we want to be going forward? So over in Bay Area, my congregation's stated mission is to change lives and heal the world. And our vision is to be the most vibrant center of religious liberal thought in the world. Well, yeah. When I first came to the church and heard those words, I really was pretty amazed. And to heal the world? The most vibrant center in the world? What kind of congregation, I thought, one with only barely 200 people, would take on a job like that? And yet, when I first arrived there, in my own new in town, just divorced, what's going to happen to me, liminal space, I did find such healing and welcoming from that community. And so I know from experience that their mission, their vision was not just idle words. But now, as we're looking at Unitarian Universalism, and when I look around our sanctuaries in general, I have to admit that I have some concern. Because as you know, our faith is in a great period of reassessment. And there's the 8th principle that's on the table to approve. But simultaneous with that, we have this reworking of Article 2 and all the reformatting of the principles that you're hearing about. Well, all that change is very anxiety producing, I think. And so I'm wondering if we might think about how we can just focus on what we as congregations are doing, how we are acting and responding to one another as all of this paper work gets done, as all of this semantics gets parsed out in other quarters. So in a sense, they have made decisions, and some of it we feel was out of our control and without our consent even. But yet, we still know that our essential Unitarian Universalism is not going to change. We still believe in the 7 principles that we've always had. And every congregation has the power to show up mindfully however it decides to do. And so we just have to keep remembering that we can manage and change our own little piece of the world as it best reflects our values and our compassion right here in the UU Fellowship of Galveston. So denominationally as well as congregationally, we're assessing how to move forward. Our national membership rolls are stagnant. In a white paper recently, Congregations and Beyond, our former president, Peter Morales, noted that for every adult who is a member of a UU congregation, there are 3 more who identify but really just don't attend or belong. Also, we seem to have developed some template whereby we raise our children in our RE programs, but they don't usually continue in membership. So I guess we can say we've done a pretty good job of placing women in positions of leadership, and we also have a pretty large population of people who identify as LGBTQ. But there are still a lot of Black and brown people who like our ideas, but don't find us all that welcoming. So if we want to be honest, we're not always doing the best job of being the most vibrant center of liberal religion. So we have to continue, as Peter Morales says, to lower those walls between our congregation and the larger world. But you know, our UU system of polity, our system of governance, is one whereby we share our views, our principles with other churches, but we have to keep remembering about our own local empowerment. And so that might calm us down considerably when we think about all these changes. We don't have to take our marching orders from the top. It's in our hands how we want to show up in the world. It's always been that way since the 1700s. Each congregation can stay as it is, committed to UUism and to its local people. So I know that you see yourselves as full of kindness and always ready to accept people who find this place and want to become part of this family. But if I had to draw a picture of our congregations, I think I would draw them as circles with doors. Well, there's really no lock on the door, and we go out into the world and through that door, and we offer money, and we offer advocacy, and we offer support, care. But then we come back home, and our circle can close. Other times, when someone comes here, we can open the door and we welcome them in. Of course, everyone is welcome here, but the mirror shows us to be mostly older white people located in a region of South Texas that's 48% Hispanic, almost 20% Black, and where the median age is under 35. Well, the median age is 35. So when a young person or a person of color knocks on one of our doors, do they see in themselves, do they see in this room pieces of themselves when they come inside? Do they see something that heals them and excites them and wants them to stay here and return? So we do say that we want to be inclusive, but I'd like to challenge us that inclusion can be different from offering beloved community. What is beloved community, and how do we want to actualize that? Well, inclusion means saying, you're welcome here. You're welcome here. But this is sort of the way that we've done things. This is how we operate. And if you want to come on and join us, you can come and be here. You can sit here with us. American society is notorious, I think, for saying that, give us, you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses. But there's a certain way that you do things here. And so people are expected to sort of make those changes. They sometimes have to abandon who they feel themselves to be culturally or personally in order to be part of some other group. So our life is based on basically a white European model of how life should be, of language we should use, how we should dress, how to conduct our learning and our spiritual exploration. So it is possible to say that you're inclusive, but yet we don't necessarily always ensure that people feel seen in the reality of who they are. People maybe who are indigenous Native American, people of color, people from Eastern religions, Hinduism, Islamic religions, people who are in their 20s and 30s, or people who have so-called blue-collar jobs and don't have college degrees. I know I felt that when I first came to UU Church, coming from the blue-collar background. People were talking about their homes in the Hamptons, and I'm like, maybe I'll get to go to San Antonio, I don't know, for my vacation. So beloved community does involve embracing people as who they are and knowing that sometimes we might want to think about modifying the way that we present and thinking about changes and approaches to welcoming so that everyone who wants to come can feel seen and loved. So here we are now in this liminal space, ready to walk into our future. What do we want that to look like? What do we want to see? Who do we want to see around us sitting in our services? What is our vision of beloved community? So, and to what extent do we wish to mindfully, creatively change to enable the presence of a greater whole? And to what extent do we just want to stay the same? Well, one of the things we've been knowing about Unitarian Universalism for some time now as a national movement is that we have to try to begin having alternatives to operating like an intellectual discussion group or a traditional New England service. We prioritize the life of the mind, and our acceptance of many points of view, it really is one of our greatest strengths. We're working on it, but we do have further to go in decentralizing white culture as the default for our worship, as what our comfort zone is. There are several theologians of color. Linda Tuiwai Smith is one, and Gloria Anzaldúa, who's Mexican American and hails from the Rio Grande Valley, very well known in theological circles. They both talk about how a spirituality of feeling and of intuition, knowledge of the body, rather than just simply experiences of the mind, are often minimized by Western organizations. It's still historical formats that come out of Christianity, out of European philosophy, Western academic and scientific perspectives that are often seen as higher forms of knowledge. Maybe we will incorporate a Native American prayer. We may have a Cinco de Mayo or songs that honor Black history. And those are all really great outreaches. But our words of welcome, our desire to have a community that encompasses race and ethnicity, sexual orientation, all of that, that is real. We really do feel that way. But a picture of the room does not always express and reflect the hopes of our heart. So, in order to attract a more diverse and a more youthful congregation, if that's something that is wanted, we'll need to start building it with a conviction. Like somebody that has a family and they know they need a different kind of house to hold it. And so they start building it, knowing that pretty soon that family is going to come and occupy that place. It's going to take some envisioning. It's going to take a willingness to reconfigure, to add on or realign, to work side by side. And just that old Field of Dreams phrase, if we build it, they will come. So, but it's not something we can do by dragging people in off the street or creating some idealistic demographic chart. But, you know, it can be oppressive, I think, if we always stay the same. We have to be willing to see the way that UUism is currently structured, how it's a reflection of our highly educated white intellectual forebears. And so we find ourselves often pulling back to the familiar, like people everywhere, and we are feeling now some pressures to change. And when that happens, we're like other people who feel like, well, you know what? I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't know that this is what I want to do. And so it is a very liminal time, and it's a time for us to maybe embrace the opportunity with curiosity and reflectivity. So as a cerebral, mostly white, educated congregation, we need to understand that calls for change from marginalized people, like is coming now in this push for the eighth principle, they are feeling left out, and we are discussing it. We are worrying about it. We're procrastinating about it a lot of times in our congregations. But to them, it still looks like we're holding a color line, and it doesn't feel welcoming to them. But changes can happen in a moment if we decide to go forward. And that does involve, again, that uncertainty, that being okay with the liminal space as the work unfolds. And it requires a lot of bravery. It requires being willing to live for a while in a place of discomfort as old systems are remolded into forms that appeal to the heart and to the physical self, as well as to the mind and the intellect. So I read about a church that's in Camp Springs, Maryland. And in 2000, they were 95% white, but they were living in a neighborhood near Washington, D.C. that was primarily black. And so they took a look around their room and they said, we want to be more representative of the world that we actually live in. We want to be different from who we see here. So they just decided to live into their Unitarian Universalist mission. And within 3 years, they had totally reconfigured their congregation's demographic so that now there were 4 out of 10 congregants that were people of color. So it can be done, and it can be done relatively quickly. And so compare that success story to the story of GA in 1969 in Boston, when Unitarian Universalists, who were always known for our support of the civil rights movement, were among the first to act on behalf of Black empowerment. But the quest for Black empowerment and presence in the UUA had turned into a battle over funding, because there were voices asking for there to be money put behind these efforts. And it turned confrontational at that GA, and the members of one Black advocacy group took over the microphones, and they would not allow people to speak. And so there was a walkout at that GA. Some of you may be old enough to remember when that happened. And some of their white allies walked out as well. Well, what had gone wrong that it went from walking the streets with civil rights protests down in Selma, Alabama, to having a walkout of people at a GA? So, time has shown us that what had gone wrong was a failure to understand and to viscerally feel that pain and rejection that people of color sometimes feel when they don't feel like they're being heard and welcomed. So this wasn't an issue that was going to be solved by managing money. It wasn't going to be solved by having another study group, or even by allowing Black voices to have more space. It needed to be a joint venture, a liberation that needed to happen not by some abstract intellectual process, or by white people graciously granting it to people of color. Spiritual liberation is when people free each other. And that's heart work. That's heart work and emotional work. And UUs are often very pragmatic and businesslike and very head-centered. And so in addition to being the first to act on behalf of Black empowerment, UUs at that time really just turned their back on Black empowerment, and it's continued to be problematic to this day, so that now we have this question of the 8th principle ready for each congregation to decide on. And now on top of that, we have Article 2, which, if you've seen the diagram, it's got a flower, and there's the word love at the center of it. But it's very different verbiage than we've been hearing from our 7 principles. And it's very confusing. So again, I just invite us to sort of hold that anxiety, to look at it all with curiosity, but to think about how we are responding and what we are doing, rather than what we are studying and what the words actually say. So the 8th principle states in part that we will be working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and institutions. So this is not just an issue for Black and white, although it sometimes feels that way. Because of where we live, we have to really invite in the presence of our Hispanic neighbors and of younger people. And some of us object to being told that this is a thing we should be doing. We do value our independence, but the process has come to have a political tone, I think. But really, it is the most human of endeavors. because we're being asked to undo centuries of separation and pain and to stop rationalizing why there might be some other better thing to do. So, love and kindness, as we know, benefits us all and begins a return of the world to its natural order. So there's now 257 congregations nationwide that have adopted this eighth principle, and many of them are right here in Texas. And so enacting change is just a hard thing to do, in part because it involves a change in identity and a willingness to give up old ways of doing things. There's a book called The 21st Century Church as an Emotional System, and the author, Peter Steinke, talks about how resistance to naming a problem is coming from within ourselves, and our attachment to familiarity can cause churches to stay stuck. Sometimes we want to say, oh, if they weren't doing this, if they weren't asking us for that, we would be just fine. And so we so clearly, desperately want to do things that move us forward, but that we're comfortable with. And so, but we have to keep in mind that we still have our same vision, we still have our same principles, and we get to have action that we're comfortable with. We don't necessarily have to rush into acceptance of just some words that are coming from some other place. So we have anxiety, but we can use it to build anew, to take a chance and build anew. And some people say, well, why should we do this? Because we are all right as we are right now. We are good church. We're good people. And we're already social justice oriented. And so why would we change things? But again, maybe it's because this hour from 10:30, 11 to noon in American life is still the most segregated hour in American society. Where are the young people? Where are the people of color? And we just don't want to do that anymore. We want things to be different. So we need to get out of our heads a little bit and start imagining and feeling what it's like for others to have you leanings and views, but just not be able to viscerally relate to our services. And so people will say, if you love me, I need you to show me that you mean it. And not doing things a little bit differently means that you're going to still stay the same. Well, our way of thinking in Unitarian Universalism got started back with the document called the Cambridge Platform. It was 1648, and it was the start of the movement that we have today. And one of the things that it said was that there's no greater church than a congregation. And each congregation has such power to do good in the world. And so we don't really have to wait for a national organization to give us instructions. We don't have to look around and see what other people are doing. We just know, and as you know what your principles are, and you know the goodness of your heart. So we just only have to keep that door open and accomplish the good deeds of the day. We can make a real and permanent difference if you just begin. So here again, these words from Susan Frederick Gray: the work to create beloved community takes deepest root within the congregations where we live into the fullness of the calling. And again, these provocative words from the Sufi poet Rumi: I have a certain knowing, but now I won't cite. So you know what beloved community looks like and should be, but now we just need to see it. We just need to make it more manifest. So whether or not we decide to make changes on paper, this is a time to make beloved community more real than ever, right before our eyes, to do things and not just have some abstract idea in our heads, and not to be worrying about the words. So if liberation and not separation is what we want, we can move from discussion to action, and we can step through our liminal spaces with joy and adventure and with love for those who are waiting to be received, because you can be the ones that the world has been waiting for. And this I do believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.